because it centres around the Chinese businessman, the owner Dai Yong. Mr. Young has already been fined a further £50,000 for failing to meet financial deadlines over wages at the weekend there. I mean, the club has financial problems from top to bottom.
Yep.
Of that there is no doubt. Reports of people not being paid. At the weekend there, Reading fans forced the abandonment of their own League One match with Port Vale in protest at Dai's ownership. Reading have already been deducted 4 points this season for breaching league rules when the club failed to pay player wages on time or in full. And the club have faced 16-point deductions under Dai Yong's ownership. Now, it seems that there's a wall of silence when it comes to hearing from the owner himself, but that wasn't the case just before we came on air in the person of the chief executive, because I managed to make contact with Mr. Dai Yong Pang, the chief executive. He was on the move, but was happy to go on the record. So I asked him first for his reaction to Reading fans causing the abandonment of their own match at the weekend.
I share the frustrating about the selling process, but the reaction is done nothing good for the club and it all done nothing good for the selling process. The selling process is undergoing. I please ask our fans be more patient. It takes time. Just everybody, for loyal fans, please be patient.
So you say the selling process is underway. Do you have buyers?
We've been keep talking to all different kind of buyer group after two offers been fall out. So we're still, talking all kind of different people, and Mr. Dai is 100% willing to sell the club.
Does he realise how important the football club is to the supporters?
We understood, and also he trying to put the club in the safe hand. We cannot just sell the club to any people who come in with the proof and something.
Mr. Pang, all I would ask is, how has it come to this situation? How have we arrived at this place?
It's complicated. It's not. We can't describe this in a minute. So it's already complicated and unfortunately situation.
But Mr. Dai will be selling the club. Are you worried about further protests?
I did worry about it, but there's nothing I can do more. We doing our job, and some fans they think they're doing the right thing. So what I can say, just ask our fans, please be more patient. The selling process is undergoing.
So that was the chief executive, Simon Dai Yong Pang, saying we'd ask the fans to be a bit more patient. He's saying Mr. Dai is 100% willing to sell the club, but it's got to be sold to safe hands. There's something of an irony in that.
No, it's got to be sold for the right money that he wants to get returned. That's what's holding it up, isn't it? I suspect. The safe hands things will be determined by the EFL, right?
Right.
Yeah. And so the real issue is how much money he can recoup from the ridiculous amount of money spent in Reading to turn it into a club that's in the condition that it's in right now. No one disagrees with the principle of the Reading fans' frustration yesterday. A lot of things were taken from my observations yesterday. A lot of Reading fans having derogatory comments about me and my understanding of their particular position. I understand clearly their position. I understand my only difference of opinion with them is, do I think it's appropriate for them to go onto a football pitch and cause a match to be abandoned? And I understand that gets them a lot of attention, but what does it actually achieve? Is that what we should be allowing fans to do, even in the most extreme of circumstances? And also, can you hold the EFL responsible? How can you hold the EFL responsible? Because you can't just make up rules on the fly. The rules are in place. The 72 football clubs vote for these rules. And the EFL, and I am no speaker for the EFL. Yes, they're more competent. Yes, I rate Rick Parry after having met him more times in recent times than I met him before. Yes, I'm a big fan of Trevor Birch's. And the previous EFL ownership models or management models, no, they were crap. I worked with it for 10 years. I know what I'm talking about. So I'm no advocate for those guys. But there was a framework, and the EFL stepped in and referred Reading and their behaviour and the absolute ridiculousness of the way this football club's being run to the processes that have been established, the rules that are put in place that govern the game. And the independent disciplinary panel decided to fine them. They didn't decide. You can't put a compulsory purchase order on a football club. You can't say, we don't like this owner, so we're going to rock in and oust him. That's not how it works. The fans may want that, and I understand why they want it, because it's their football club in spirit, it's their football club in emotion, but it's not their football club legally. And the challenge is you can't just allow someone to rock in on that, because you'll set precedents. This guy shouldn't be running a football club. The Russian shouldn't have been allowed to buy the football club from Majewski. This guy shouldn't have been allowed to buy it. But when he spent 260 million quid on it, nobody had a problem with it. Now that he's lost his interest, now that he's lost his mojo, now that he's probably economically squeezed elsewhere or run out of money, the last thing he thinks about is funding a football club anymore. But unfortunately, that's the consequence you take on. I took it on. I ran myself to 80-90% of my fortune being lost because I stayed there too long, and then I handed it over to other people for nothing and actually gave them the opportunity to have it for nothing. So when people start comparing it, like some of these Reading fans piled on yesterday, to my understanding, they don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah, but having said that, Simon, is there not an irony? I mean, when Mr. De Jong Pang came to air there, and that was good of him, and I found him perfectly polite, very amenable. And he's saying, yeah, Mr. Dye is 100% willing to sell the club, but it's got to go to the right buyer. Is there not something of an irony in that?
First of all, that's not his. First language. So we take into consideration some of the things he said in there. It's not undergoing. It's the sale's ongoing. So we can paraphrase things that he means. He is saying the standard shtick. It's not his job to determine, given the level of ridiculousness that the club finds itself in. Only somebody that wasn't grasping reality would trot that one out and say, we want to leave it in safe hands. Come on. No one can make that argument.
Right.
So what he's talking about is a politically correct message of, no, you don't. The issue clearly must be how much money they can sell the football club for, or how much ongoing responsibility they may have for the inherent debts that are in there. Because you're going to get a load of people that will take Reading for nothing. A load of people that will take Reading and say, well, I'll take it and I'll take some of the future liabilities, but you're having some of those. So the guy's sitting there with there's no condoning here from me, of £260 million worth of cash just gone, right? And a club that's now in a situation where it needs money to run. The Reading fans will say, oust the board, get rid of them. And I understand why they're saying it. They can't meet their obligations. Do you think it makes it any better? And then you've got to have a process where the next owner comes in. So you've got to insulate yourself against the next owner being somebody that's not trying to profit out of it. So that's going to take 3 or 4 months to sort out. Who's going to meet the obligation? The PFA, where are they in this then, where their members are not getting paid and stuff?
But having said that, what is the solution when the owner cannot fund the club any longer, or is unwilling to fund the club any longer?
Well,
because that's where we're at with Reading.
He is funding the club to some extent, but he's funding it in a way which is not in keeping with how you should fund a business properly, by meeting its obligations when they fall due. If he wasn't funding it within the confines of a parameter of rules, you know what would happen? Players would walk out of contracts because they hadn't been paid over a period of time. Creditors would start applying for the football club to go into administration to protect their interest. HMRC have already put a wind-up order in place, which has been dealt with. He's dealing with it on a needs-must basis, not as a going concern basis.
Right.
Now, that's not ideal, and people won't like to hear it, but the problem is with that is you cannot provide rules for those kind of behaviour. You cannot, and haven't done. And if you do want to, then the 72 clubs have got to get together, change the rules, and allow the EFL to come in and say, right, you're out. I'm not sure who I'm going to put in, but I'm going to put in whoever I feel like because it's better than what's in there currently. You've got to look at the actual practicalities of it rather than the emotion of it all and go, well, get rid of him. Is that...
What do you make of the EFL stand, Simon? Are they playing to the gallery? Either fund the club or sell out?
Well, it's an empty statement, isn't it? Because they've clearly got no ability to do much more than wait for him to put himself in a position where he can be ultimately exited from the business. And that is, unfortunately, my dear friends, if this club goes into administration or some fool enough party meets his expectations. Because unless they meet his expectations, Reading fans, yes, they are emotional, and I understand it, and I don't take it lightly, but invading a football pitch, stopping a game, if you want to do something, boycott the stadium. I know it's difficult. I know you want to watch your football club, but everyone's got to make some sacrifices in this.
So don't go.
Then that will send out even bigger. You got an empty football stadium in there with not a single Reading fan in there.
Right.
The media will be all over it, but you won't have stopped the football match, will you? You won't have stopped Port Vale fans from travelling down to watch it. You won't have stopped Port Vale players from playing. You won't create a situation where your football club can't compete in the league because it's getting sanctioned. Those sort of things are the alternatives. They're not ideal, but that's sending a message to the owner.
They're not getting much sympathy, Reading or their fans, from other clubs. There's no name on this one. It couldn't happen to a better club. Wasn't so long the Reading fans were down with us at Fratton Park.
And that's true that as well.
Singing Pay Up Pompey.
And they were mocking Derby from what I
said
as well.
Apparently they were mocking Derby, they were mocking Wigan as well. Funnily enough, it's Wigan next for Reading. Would the intention be the same? in the minds of the fans to go there and stage a pitch protest. Now that you've heard from Mr. Dayong Pang, the Reading Chief Executive, for the first time, who says, be patient, are you now prepared to be patient in the interest of the club going into the right hands?
The problem is that the guy has run the business in such a fashion that he's not only cost himself 260 million quid to do it, he's also left the club in a perilous financial position which requires ongoing funding. So you have two challenges. You have somebody coming in that might want to meet the expectations of an owner trying to recoup some of his money, and someone that's also going to have deep enough pockets to be able to fund the ongoing debts. And what the insinuation seems to be is the debts are significant. I mean, not small, significant, and potentially people are going to have about 100 million quid to get the club into a position where it can even compete.
100 million?
I mean, you're looking at now the carcass of a football club that, as the fans' representative yesterday said quite rightly, 10 years ago you're in the Premier League. But that could happen to a lot of football clubs. Blackpool fell down the pyramid under Carl Oyston. And other football clubs have all found these challenges. Portsmouth being one. Of course, we've seen this happen to Portsmouth. Wigan being another. It's not unique to Reading. The problem is how do you get yourself out of this situation unless the owner, and what the fans will say is, keep putting pressure on him. But like the Glazers, these guys are insulated. They're not in this country. They're not indexed to the football club the way that football fans are. And their main concern now is to get themselves out from underneath the losses that they've got, and more importantly, not to be on the hook for them. This is not important for me, for them.
Yeah.
For ongoing costs.
Well, let's hear what the supporters are thinking now that we've heard for the first time from one of the owner's representatives at the club, Dayong Pang, the chief executive, who's saying the owner is 100% willing to sell the club. He wants it to go into safe hands, and we're asking the fans to be patient. Are the fans in the mood to be patient? Caroline Parker represents the Supporters Trust at Reading. Caroline, good morning. Thanks so much for joining us. You heard from Dayong Pang there. He's saying be patient. Are you going to be patient?
I think our patience is wearing thin, Jim, to be honest. We've been going through the mill for about 5 years now. We know we've had interested parties at the table, and we're hearing that he's changed the T's and C's at the 11th hour. This isn't helpful. There needs to be a real concerted effort to sell the club, and he needs the appetite to sell the club. What I would say, in reference to what Simon is saying, Guy has made ridiculous decisions around increasing the cost base of our club, particularly when you look at the gross investment in terms of Bearwood and the Category 1 facility. That is a millstone around the club's neck. Now, really, if he'd made sensible decisions, we were able to get back into the Championship and have that TV deal, the revenue losses per annum might be in the range of maybe 2 to 3 million. Now, the things that he's done has put the club in a perilous position. I would also suggest that most of the debt is to die. So if he does sell for less than he would want, fundamentally he would be walking away from having to continue funding the club, which is what everybody wants. There is absolutely a deal to be done here. He's mucking people around. I don't believe what Dayong Pang has just said there. We've been lied to consistently by the club, and the fans have had enough, and that is why you saw what you saw on Saturday.
That's very strong from you, Caroline. Simon, what's your take on what Caroline said? Because obviously they mean what they say, the fans.
A lot of what Caroline says is unarguable. It's clearly evident. You know, the club ran wage bills, which was absurd, of 110% of turnover in the Championship a few years ago. We all watched it. Club's been sanctioned left, right and centre. Nobody in their right mind would suggest that what he's done is particularly admirable. The challenge is what can you do to, as Caroline rightly says, engender the right appetite for selling this business. And that's the challenge that the Reading fans will have in conjunction with, I believe that they have every right to be as irate as they are, every right to be as invested in protests. I don't believe that extends, this is where our difference may come, onto breaking up a football match and invading a pitch. I understand what it creates. It creates a media narrative, which creates perhaps the pressure that they think will bring an appetite for the owner to sell. The fact is, when it comes to money and it comes to guys of this sort of position that have been able to spend 260 million quid, in the same way that the Glazers are hard fast against a backdrop of absolutely unified vitriol, he will not move until he gets what he wants.
And you were suggesting, Simon, instead of causing the abandonment of matches, fans who feel as strong as they do and are right to feel as strong as they do don't go.
I'm just
boycott the game.
I'm suggesting an alternate position because you can't bring the football pyramid into disrepair and disrepute. You can't affect other clubs travelling down across the country and their fans because of the challenges of one football club. But what you can do as Reading fans is go, I'm not prepared. As much as this is a sacrifice for me and I don't want to miss watching my club, how about you play in front of empty stadiums? That will get just as much media attention media focus.
What do you think of that,
pressure.
Caroline?
It's difficult, isn't it? A lot of what Simon says is true, but fundamentally, we have got ourselves to a position where you've seen desperate, hopeless fans. You must know yourself, Simon, from your days at Palace.
I do.
Reading fans are a mild bunch. This is super extreme what you've seen today.
Agreed. Agreed.
And this is a desperate measure. There are strategic work strands going on in the campaign. We're looking at everything we possibly can to get this guy out. We're meeting the EFL today. We really want to work closely with the EFL. We realise we might have to break new ground to see what they can do in their regulations to get this man out. You know,
and that's all fair enough, Caroline.
We all want him out,
and that's all very sensible thinking. Because and absolutely right. Because the reality of it is that people shouldn't be able to irresponsibly run a football club. I had mine for 10 years. I ran out of money, and I took my medicine. I stayed to the very end, hurt myself, and then handed it for others. So my situation is very different. This guy has set the place on fire, and ultimately the consequences of it is the football club is in disarray. Now, when the argument's made about the EFL. The rules are the rules, and the rules have been established by 72 football clubs. The EFL have to adhere to them. They can't make rules on the fly. But there should be a change, perhaps, to unique circumstances when you've got this kind of errant ownership. Because right now, there's still a funding call, though, Caroline, isn't there? You take this fellow out, who's going to pay the bills?
Well, at the end of the day, like I've said before, the EFL, I know they have competition regulations, but fundamentally they have the power to admit this owner, Simon. Therefore, they must have the appropriate powers to remove
this owner. They don't, Caroline. That's the problem.
Well,
they don't, Caroline. The rules don't permit for almost like a compulsory purchase order in terms of being able to force somebody out of a business or force somebody out of their house. They don't have it. They may need to change it and they may need to adapt, but it's not the same thing, Caroline. What they have to do is follow their own policies, which is why they referred Reading to the independent disciplinary panel. The independent disciplinary panel have the ability to be able to make sanctions, and that sanction could have been something more far-reaching than just points, but they didn't.
Okay.
And those are the challenges.
They didn't yet, Simon. The EFL recommended to the panel that he be expelled as an owner.
They did, yeah.
That was a great step from the EFL.
They did, yeah.
They are on our side, which is brilliant. We need the independent panel to go a step further.
Agreed.
And we've got to make some changes in this country.
Caroline,
everything that we're doing is great, and we're going to keep going, Simon. We're not going to stop.
Simon, in the last few moments, the EFL chairman, Rick Parry, has been down the road. We're here at London Bridge. Down the road from here is Parliament, and Rick Parry has been in front of the DCMS committee, and he's been talking about the financial predicament at Reading.
What are we trying to do with Reading? We share the fans' concern. We absolutely do. We're trying to take action against Dai Young, the owner. Reading has fallen foul of our profit and sustainability rules, and as you are well aware, has suffered the punishments. And to be fair to Reading, they did come clean. They were transparent, acknowledged the problem, and the problem was about throwing too much money, chasing the Holy Grail. It always fails, always results in major problems. Just before Christmas, we took action against the owner, not against the club, in an attempt to get him disqualified. Disciplinary panel found on that occasion that it was not warranted. They fined him instead, and frankly, fining Dai Young is of no use at all. If he won't put money into the club, he's not going to pay the fines. We're meeting fan groups this afternoon. We want a new owner. We want a resolution to the problem, just as much as the Reading. Don't ever believe that the EFL doesn't care. We do care. We don't want to be losing clubs. But we're not in a position where we can actually easily force him to divest of the club.
That's sort of the root of my question. So you don't have the powers, actually, to save a club in this situation?
It's complex. We have the powers to potentially to disqualify the owner. What we don't have the power to do is to force a sale.
So that was Rick Parry, the chairman of the EFL, speaking at the GCMS just a short time ago. Simon, why don't they disqualify him? Surely that was a necessary step to take.
Because currently the construct of it is they have to recommend the processes to go through an independent disciplinary panel. And the disciplinary panel were recommended by the EFL for a disqualification. And the independent disciplinary panel turned it down and turned it into a sanction. What they don't have the power is to, like I say, is to have a compulsory purchase order to force one owner out and put another owner in.
Right.
And in the meantime, there is a question that has to be asked, and it never likes to be asked because it's always the question of get rid of the guy. Who's going to fund the ongoing liabilities?
Oh no, I know.
That's the question that people need to ask.
Yeah, but
because it can't be the fans because they won't be able to do it.
Reading fans will have picked up on the fact that Rick Parry has said there, we don't want to be losing clubs. No, we don't. And this is the territory we could now be in with Reading. Again,
and we're right to point out the extent it can go to. But we do have to remember that over the years of football, many businesses in most industries don't survive 130 years. Most of these football clubs are 100, 120, 130 years of age. We've had very few casualties that have gone, finished. We've had financial landscapes from my club at Crystal Palace. We've had financial landscapes at Brighton. We've had financial landscapes at Leeds United. We've had financial landscapes at Portsmouth. We've had financial landscapes at a significant proportion of the football clubs, but never really a liquidation of any significant amount of football clubs. So whilst this is a painful process and a difficult process for fans that live vicariously and emotionally through their football clubs, there is a process where this guy will be gotten out. He won't be in there in perpetuity. I suppose the question is, how much more damage can he do whilst the process of either finding a new buyer or finding a methodology to find him disqualified? And then
what more damage can he do?
Well, he can continue to breach every single governance that the football club are supposed to be abiding by, and they can keep on getting sanctioned and sanctioned and sanctioned until they're at the bottom of League Two and in non-league football. That's what can happen to Reading. Because if that's where... But now that doesn't make much sense for him, be clear, because he can then retain no value and no debate about anyone paying any money for the football club. So which is it that's better? Finding someone, because it is about... And I know that they're going to say that that's a lot of the debts will be to the owner, and that if he's got debentures in there for the debt, that he's going to have to release those debentures and let people buy the club unencumbered. But there will also be other debts in there that will not just be to the owner. And they may well, wishing it doesn't make it so. They can't touch this man. He's not emotionally invested in their football club. He's not geographically situated, albeit the fact that he's got a big house in Buckingham Palace Road, as John Majewski was discussing yesterday. But he will only go when there's something vaguely resembling what he'll accept. Now, that acceptance may be, as Caroline quite eloquently put, when his appetite for sale is increased. And that will be the justification for invading pitches. We depart on that. We depart on that in terms of the validity of that action.
Yeah.
But I do not diminish the argument that it needs to be... But they're being listened to. I'm telling you, the conversations I've had with people within the confines of the EFL, they don't take this lightly. They don't think it's a joke.
No,
this is an embarrassment to them on their watch.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time with Rick Parry recently, speaking to him. I know where he's coming from. I know Trevor Birch for 20 years. I know where these guys are coming from. The problem is now is that the way that the game is going, the way that globalisation has become part of football, and the way that people are prepared to invest money in football clubs that they don't have an emotional attachment to and then have any responsibility for, has changed the landscape. This guy has spent 260 million quid to turn the football club into a basket case.
I mean, it's almost unbelievable.
Not the fans,
yeah.
The current predicament of the football club.
Do you think the fans, and you're right, Caroline Parker of the Reading Supporters Trust spoke very, very well. Caroline,
as did the fella yesterday.
If you're still listening.
As did the fella yesterday.
Yeah, we're delighted to have you on earlier on. We heard from Dayong Pang today, the Reading chief executive, who works very closely with the owner Dayong. And Dayong Pang was saying, Simon,
that CEO.
The chief exec was saying that the owner, though, is 100% willing to sell the club. Well, do it. In spite of the fact you've lost a ton of money, sell it.
I get that. But you're taking the emotional argument rather than the commercial argument.
Well, what else can the fans do?
Well, because he, in his mind's eye, is responsible for getting the best outcomes for himself. If I'm the owner of Reading, and if I was the owner of Crystal Palace now, I felt my responsibility was greater than myself, hence the reasons why I put myself in such an awful position. He doesn't feel that responsibility, and that's the byproduct of the nature of the way the football in this country has become. It's become globalised. It's beginning to be perceived as an investment opportunity rather than the cook, the candlestick maker, the baker, the big man in the town wanting to own a football club because everyone wants to be grateful to him for owning their local football club and the reflection of it. It's changed.
So you're saying where you were bothered, emotionally he's not bothered?
No, he's financially bothered.
He must be.
And what you're asking him to be is emotionally bothered.
What would you buy Reading for today with the losses that he's incurred?
I wouldn't buy Reading full stop because it's not a club that interests me.
What kind of bid would get it?
I don't know the level of the debts, and I don't know the level of debts to him. If all the debts are to him and there's no ongoing liabilities, it's a decent football club. It's
of course it is.
Martin O'Neill talked about the preparedness to criticise the Category 1 scheduling and the cost implications behind it. Let me tell you about what building a youth development policy is. It's a long-term benefit for the football club that you should only give up, and an intermediate term benefit if you have to, because the development of young players will fuel your football club.
Yeah.
Will build a football club that makes players want to play for it rather than do you a favour and turn up for wages.
Yeah, Simon, we know why Richard Masters, the Premier League boss, and the EFL chairman Rick Parry are down the road at the DCMS at the moment, because they're being questioned by the committee there on the lack of a deal for a redistribution of funds in football. Does the Reading story not surely highlight why the Premier League are right to be reluctant over gifting the EFL more money?
No. Why?
Well, you're looking at financial meltdown at one club.
All right, let's go in the Premier League then. Have a look at what's going on there then, shall we? Let's work out the fact that the league's sanctioning football clubs left, right and centre. That we've got the champions of the country that have got 115 charges that have yet been unanswered. We've got two big clubs, one of them the former European champions that have just got back into the Premier League, and one that's been a stable diet of the Premier League since its inception, in financial trouble, and other clubs possibly that will find themselves in these difficulties. So let's not say the Premier League are the blueprint. It's got nothing to do with the Premier League's argument about distribution. The Premier League don't want to give any money because they don't want to give any money. Not because of the EFL. The EFL are actually ahead of the Premier League. They introduced salary cap mentalities before the Premier League even thought about it. And the government getting involved, this is the government that sat here during COVID, that funded every other sport, potentially, and then turned around and said, football, get on with it, because it saw transfers being spent in the Premier League, and it equates what the Premier League does to the other 72 clubs in the Football League.
Yeah.
So the government, I don't know how they dare get involved, because they're about as much use as a chocolate teacup.
Many people voicing their concerns and offering sympathy about the Reading situation to the Reading fans. There's Adam, a Tottenham fan. Adam, I'm glad you sent this. I live in Reading, but I don't support the team. Many of my friends do. The impact of what's happening to the club is being echoed across the town. The whole place seems just flat. Football clubs are so important to the health of the local community, and I feel that there are too many owners who miss that vital point.
Agreed.
That's a great
Agreed.
point, Adam. Tottenham fan who's joining the debate about the predicament Reading find themselves in.
It's unrealistic, Jim, though. What you're asking for is philanthropic goodwill from globalised owners that have no relationship with a football club.
Yeah.
They've come in to buy it as an asset. You may live, breathe, eat, sleep, and whatever else it, right? They see it as an asset. And ultimately, we shepherd them in the door. We welcome them through the door. We've heard callers come on. I listened to Andy Goldstein's show the other day with people phoning in saying, what we need is every football club to have a billionaire owner. Oh, really? Is that what it's supposed to be then? That everyone's supposed to come into football?
No, but
they're supposed to run their football clubs properly.
Yeah.
That's what they're supposed to do.
That's it. And I get what you're saying, Simon. I remember speaking to De Shatley of Charlton and saying to him, look, it's the most important thing to the Charlton fans, their football club. And he virtually said in reply, yeah, but it's not the most important thing to me.
And there it is.
Jim White and Simon Jordan. Monday to Friday mornings from 10 on AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.